Adam, welcome back to the Promised Land podcast. It's a regular occurrence now. There's lots happening at Manchester United, and thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk about the midfield off the back of the news that Casemiro is definitely leaving. Kobbie Mainoo may be in line for a new deal as well. And we were going to do the head coaches podcast, which we may have to push back a little bit and release maybe next week now as it stands, because this news has just got in the way. How are you doing? Welcome back to the show. This is the second consecutive Friday, I think, right, that we've recorded this?
Yeah, it's we're going from monthly to fortnightly, and now we've done a weekly one. It's good fun, so I appreciate you having me. You know how much I love the pod, so anytime, any place.
Love having you on, and people also love having you on as well. They tell me a lot in the comments. So, give the people what they want. That is the way that this goes. Subscribe to the podcast if you've not done so already. All the links are in the description. Follow Adam and myself as well on the X machine and other social channels. Links are also in the description as well. Let's get into it, because I want to talk about the midfield today, because I think that the news on Casemiro actually leaving, we all knew he was going to leave, didn't we? We knew he wasn't going to get a contract extension, but I don't think anybody really expected the news to just bam come out of nowhere on Thursday evening. So first of all, your thoughts. Is this, I know what you're going to say, is this the right decision?
Do you know what I'm going to say? I mean, I don't know that it's the right decision personally. I think at the right club with a player like that player gets phased out by the competition over time as they regress physically, as they can play less games, as what was happening already. The players you have in your squad, the midfielders that you sign, phase that player out. So that if we can talk in football manager terms, a regular starter or important player goes down and they become a squad player and impacts up, or a fringe player. And that is the pathway it should take. So then they are phased out that way. To completely reinvent the engine room this way is a big TBD. To me, reduced terms, I don't know how much capacity there was to reduce his wages. So, if we're saying that his wages with Champions League with £350,000 a week, they were about 262 and a half with a 25% reduction. So could you get it down into the wage structure of between 150 and 200K a week, where he's on a 1-year contract with a trigger, that sort of thing? I probably would have been more in favor of that. But I do understand it from a financial perspective of releasing, between, let's say, anywhere between 12 and 20 million pounds off your books next year. And you and I have spoken about this. I don't think that trigger was ever really like a story. It's a story because it's in his contract and it's fact and all that sort of thing. But Ineos, whoever you want to call them, we're never going to let him hit that. But it's interesting to me now, the amount of transformation you have to go through, how important the midfield is, the players that you sign. All of a sudden, you and I have spoken about needing one, definitely two midfielders. You don't want to brief.
How many do they need?
I think it is 3.
Me too.
What about you?
Well, give me something away for later in the podcast. But I think in terms of right decision, maybe the right thing to say there is it's the right decision not to renew the contract on the terms that he's on. So I think, was this extension on reduced terms ever a possibility, really? I think it was suggested in some quarters. I personally never saw the player actually going for that, because I think, look, he may love the club, and he said that he'll always be a Manchester United fan. I quite like the video package that United put together as well. But to me, I think if you're his age and there's options all over the place to go to Saudi Arabia, maybe, I don't know, back to Brazil, I'm speculating here, maybe to MLS or to a club that he's played for previously, he can probably get more money than mid-range, mid-wage level at Manchester United elsewhere. So I think, to me, I never expected that to happen. I was clinging on to the hope, because now United, look, he's one of United's, or he is probably United's most experienced player. And he has won everything that there is to win at club level. So replacing him is going to be difficult in terms of an experience sense. I know we know his limitations in the midfield area, but experience-wise, this is a big blow.
Yeah, it is. And we know how important he's been this season. You take out Bruno Fernandes, there is no one who's been more important to the team this season. You look at his numbers on and off the pitch, and I think those goal difference numbers have gone around everywhere, particularly the amount of goals we've conceded with him off the pitch. He offers so much, even from a set piece perspective, going both ways. So for me, those are the sort of concerns you worry about in the short term, but also does it mean they have to add a certain profile of midfielder? So, you look at your Elliot Andersons, your Carlos Balebas, and we are going to get into all that, so I don't want to spoil too much. But do they need to add a certain profile of midfielder who adds an aerial aspect? Because Kobbie Mainoo is good in aerial duels, but he's not like physically imposing. I don't think he's bad, but because not all like diminutive players are bad in the air. They're just smaller. They don't have the same physical presence. So do you need to find a midfielder? So say you sign 3 hypothetically, and 2 are those premium targets we've sort of spoken about. Any 2 you want to pick from. Is the third more of a auxiliary physical sort of player who is maybe more scenario based? When you play like a team like Arsenal, it's a player you can plug in to help you in set piece scenarios and just give some physical presence. Because in the Premier League, let's face it, you still need it.
Yeah, let's just, before we get into the wider conversation on the midfield, let's just talk about Casemiro, the guy, the character, the player, how it's been. Because I remember, like, I was recording the podcast, like, all that time ago when he signed. And I remember when Rob and I were talking about it, we were looking at the deal and the flags on it in terms of how expensive it was. Everybody knew that Casemiro was like a great player.
I remember listening to that.
Yeah. Everybody knew that Casemiro was a great player, but I think, and I do need to go back and listen to it to make sure like this is exactly what we said. But I'm pretty sure if it wasn't on the day of the news breaking, we did flag around that time that eventually this would be a problem. This contract would be a problem. The expense of the contract would be a problem for United. And obviously, I think that's one of the key reasons why United aren't renewing this deal. But in terms of his story at United, the old line of, I'll fix this, that just floats around. And he did for a little while. The first season, I think, after the disaster that was that start to the season, then he comes in and like everything shores up a little bit. United going on and win a trophy. I think he's had a really storied United career in a sense. He played really well. Then he's had the lull. He's been played in midfields with oceans of space that he's been unable to cover. He's had leave the football before the football leaves you, and then the renaissance. And now he's still one of United's most important players. How do you reflect on his career at United? Because it's been really storied, actually.
Yeah, I think he's had the right impact, even if he was the wrong signing. So, like, you can look at the people have bandied about the figures and the transfer fee. 1, he's not in control of it. And 2, he didn't necessarily ask for those terms. He was given them by a, frankly, incompetent, non-footballing regime who prioritized commercial success. I mean, if we go back to that episode, I would bet you're Rob, because I'm fairly certain I remember listening to it. I remember because I was where I always walk my dogs. That's where I was listening to it, and I remember thinking myself at the time is that you're signing a player of a certain age. I think he was 29 when he joined. And the thing about that at the time was the midfield needs a rebuild anyway, but you're signing a player you're going to have to replace, that you're not going to be really hard pressed to move his wages. We don't know how he's going to develop physically. I remember he played so much football because Ten Hag didn't rotate that his legs were gone by the end of the season. He had such a strong first probably 4 to 5 months, and his last month or so he was gone. And I mean, you talk about what Jamie Carragher said. That was in May 2024. So 20 months ago, he said that. And when you think about the reinvention, what he did professionally to get himself back in shape and back into the first 11, you can talk about what Ruben Amorim said about Toby Kohler and all that sort of shit. But the fact is he won his spot back, whether it was right for him to be out of the team or not, because of like the profile that he had, he won that spot back. And I think his story is pretty impressive when you look at over the term. I think it's just lost sometimes in the debate we've had about Kobbie Mainoo, the tenure of Bruno Fernandes playing deep midfield. The constant has been Casemiro. And he's been awesome. He's scored some really important goals, but he's also been involved in really important goals. Don't forget that he passed the ball to Kobbie Mainoo before he scored the equaliser against Lyon. And who set up the winner for Harry Maguire? It was Casemiro. And Casemiro actually had a number of really good assists because his ball's over the top, second only to Bruno Fernandes, and that kind of creation. So I think he surprised us in a lot of ways, because you think about this aged sort of destroyer, no longer in his prime, and he did things like that. And we saw pretty quickly that the red cards he didn't get in Spain, he certainly got in the Premier League. But also his attacking impetus was something we didn't expect. He scored a surprising amount of goals. It would be interesting to see who scored the most goals over the last 4 years and where he fits into that. But he was a constant source of them. He gave us a set-piece threat that we hadn't had for years outside of Harry Maguire. And, you can look at it in a variety of ways. You can pick out the flaws because the club is leaking them. They're bare for all to see. But I'm really grateful for the 4 years that we've had. I was awake. I just happened to be awake at 4 a.m. when the news dropped. It was about 3:45 here. I'd woken up.
Right, okay.
So checking my phone before I put on my CPAP mask and go back to sleep and saw the news. So just tweeted out my immediate reaction, put the mask on and went back to sleep. And it was really nice to see the reaction and see that people felt that way. I think he's quite a beloved player. I really liked, I followed this match-going fan called Anna. You might follow her as well. I really liked that she was saying that he'll be our next Schweinsteiger, where he'll care, care more about United than he will about Real Madrid, or in Schweinsteiger's case, Bayern Munich. I think it's really cool the attachment veterans and greats have to the club, even if they weren't there for long. Rafael Varane, not too different. And I'm ultimately, really grateful for the time, even if you want to talk about the 9-figure sum it took to buy him and pay him.
Yeah, I'm sad about it, really. I think you look back on it, and I think the video package that United put together was really nice. The things he had to say were really nice as well. Like, it stopped me. You talk about where you was. I was like mid bench press at the gym, and I was like, oh God, I got to stop here.
Just sat up on your phone.
Watch this 4-minute video. I've got to watch it. I was, you're sad about it, really, because I talk about the attitude and the professionalism a lot, and how United don't or need to develop that winning attitude again and that professional attitude. And I think just the story of like when he was out of the team and Ruben Amorim admitted himself that Toby Collier was ahead of him in the pecking order, the way that he came back from that and the way that he reestablished himself in the team, I think is an example for everybody to follow. In terms of that is how you go and apply yourself, no matter who the coach is, really. Like, if you're out of the team, work harder and win your place back. He did that, and now I hope that for the next 16 games or so, he can really go out with a flourish and show just how important he has been. But I think great example to follow. I think overall, United should be soaking up everything that they possibly can out of Casemiro over the next few months, because he's an example to follow. Incredibly decorated player, and I'm sad that it's happening, even though I think it's probably the right decision. I just didn't think that those extended terms on reduced money were a thing that was going to happen, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a good point you make, and probably something I didn't think about enough was what would he accept? Would he be willing to accept that with the offers he's going to have? What does he envision for the next part of his career? It's not like he's short of trophies. It's not like he needs the Premier League to finish a decorated career. He's won. What was really impressive as well is with all he's achieved, it was never like, and obviously the natural criticism is retirement tour, retirement package. And it never felt that way. He was so invested. The goal at Chelsea and how he celebrated with fans is something I probably won't be forgetting for a really long time. And I think his leadership as well, in a squad that's barren of it, his bond with Bruno Fernandes, that sort of player and that presence is really hard to replace. So you can talk about it. I've talked about the importance of the summer rebuild and how really if they make Champions League, they can round out the rebuild in a lot of ways. But leadership is a void that is very hard to fill. You need a particular type of player. It's not like there's Declan Rice types of midfielders all available this summer who's just happened to evolve into like the perfect player, perfect United player that we've happened to miss out on. And I know that Elliot Anderson is very similar, but he's not quite the player Rice is yet. And there's no guarantee that we'll get him. We need to get Champions League. We need Pep to leave City to give us an extra edge in the race. There's lots of things that are going to need to break right. So there are certain voids, and I've spoken about this with Bruno Fernandes quite a bit. You can talk about on-field stuff, but there's intangibles and off-field stuff, what a player means to a club, what a player means to the dressing room, that aren't easily replaced. And I think that really applies to someone like him.
There's a lot to do over the summer now. I know I've talk there about I didn't expect Casemiro to end up staying. If I was to like pick an ideal like midfield, which we'll try and get onto in a second over the course of like the summer transfer window, you probably would want Casemiro in there for his experience on reduced terms on a new 1-year deal or whatever, and he would be happy to play a rotation option or come in off the bench to add a bit of experience. But I don't think that was ever really, to me, a proper possibility. But now we're getting, even now in mid-January, we're getting a clear idea really of what's happening at United and clear plans in place. We've had this news on Casemiro. Obviously, last few days or last couple of weeks, Kobbie Mainoo has come back into the limelight and now has got his place back. And now we have news everywhere that United are ready to open discussions on a new deal for him. I would expect that happens now as well. Maybe not straight away. I would maybe think that if Kobbie's camp if they play it the right way, you wait for Kobbie to really make an impact over the next 10, 15 games or whatever. And then you go back to the table. You're like, look how important he is. We can ask for more than, because I would previously think, and that's Ahmad levels and Lenny Yoro levels in terms of like the wage structure. And I said that on the podcast earlier this week as well. But if he can go and prove how important he is, then maybe he's entitled to ask for more. But do you just before we move on, do you think that's like in the bag now? Are you still concerned about his future, or it's just a matter of time?
No, I think, for whatever you want to say about Ruben Amorim sacking, the obvious result of that is a Kobbie Mainoo extension and him staying in the club. It didn't take it, like, you can say it's only one game, but for me, the derby was a reminder of, one, what he can add that the team doesn't have, and two, just how good he already is for all his need to improve. He looks stronger on the ball. For him to do that in his first start across 90 minutes was really that was like a statement. I'm sort of back in the team performance, so I think it's a real positive. And like you said, there is a leverage play. You want to do the best thing for your clients and Kobbie Mainoo's representation, whether you have criticisms of them or not, and I certainly do. That would be the play. To let it play out, you probably have preliminary discussions now, just to touch base. You're interested in terms? Yep, let's start getting things rolling. But you'd probably want to wait until, let's say, April to really put your stamp on things and get yourself a nice, juicy extension, particularly being that the World Cup is let's say it's almost an elephant in the room in terms of how the summer plays out, because a lot of players are going to be moving this summer, but a lot of players are going to be going to the World Cup. Not a problem for Carlos Baleba, but a problem for a lot of targets. Elliot Anderson is going to be going to the World Cup. He's going to be getting back very late. He played in was it the under-21s last summer? It's a lot of football. He's going to get back very late and means he's going to be starting preseason late. And it's just, there's a lot to consider with the market in that way. And there is a lot to do. So maybe an upside play, or the way you can go glass half full on the situation, and I know you and I both love to do that, is that this allows them to get a lot of preparation done now, get preliminary discussions going, and have things in the gun, provided they qualify for the Champions League or Europa League. You line up your priority targets because those things are already happening now anyway. You're doing your preparation. Maybe it allows them to plan in a different way, which leads into our other podcast about the manager.
Yes. Keep an ear out and an eye out for that, because that will be coming soon. We're going to stick with midfielders though on this one, because we've had doubts about all of them, really, in terms of like whether they will stay or not. Like Mainoo's been up in the air. Casemiro, we always had the feeling that this would happen. Manuel Ugarte hasn't proven he's good enough, and Bruno Fernandes has a release clause in his deal. And I think we spoke last week, and I think I agree with you. Bruno staying. If United make Champions League, I think he's probably more likely to stay, personally. If not, I think there's a high chance he might end up leaving, personally. What's the structure of this midfield going to look like now going into next season? Because I think we can lock in that Mainoo will stay if he will sign a new deal. But we don't know who the manager or head coach, I did it again, is going to be. We don't know whether they're going to play a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. And there's doubt about Bruno Fernandes, there's doubt about Ugarte as well. What should the balance of the midfield be for the start of next season? And how many players do United need to sign in midfield now? We've touched on it already, 3. In terms of like how like tiers in a sense of like, you go and get your expensive one. Do you need a rotation option for around 30 million quid or whatever? Can you bring somebody through the academy? There's lots of things to work out, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And I think that you can probably think more about a Jim Thwaites or a Jacob Devaney or a variety of players who can come in and play, let's say, more auxiliary roles, needs basis. But there's also going to be academy players who need more football that they're going to get, so they're going to go on loan. So it might be needs based as to who gets promoted and when. That's just how it goes as squad depth builds out. But to me, it's 3 midfielders. So it just depends where they finish. And, if you lock it, let's just say you lock in all of those sales that are planned through the loans, whether it's Rashford for slightly reduced terms or whatever it is, Højlund, Sancho's wages are off the books for good. Casemiro's, I would be more inclined to say Harry Maguire is going to go, but he's the sort of player who might stay on reduced terms because he's not going to be chasing necessarily that next adventure.
We just talked about the experience as well, and like Maguire is one of those players.
Yeah, and so can you make do with your centre-backs, particularly if you're playing a back 4 as opposed to a back 3, for another year? Allow Aiden Heaven to develop. You've still got Lissandro, Luke Shaw is a needs-must sort of centre-back option. Mazraoui can play centre-back if needs must. So you can probably make do there for another year, but if you can stack the midfield based on whether you're playing a pivot or 3 across there, that'll be really interesting to me. But it also might depend again. If you go to 3 in midfield, does that mean that Bruno won't be playing as a 10? Well, not unless it's a 4-3-1-2. So that might depend the extent of your spending. So is it 2 premiums and a third option? Is it 1 premium and 2 different options? So, you exchange a Carlos Baleba for a Manu Kone. Or is it, Elliot? So let's just say it's Elliot Anderson and then 2 others. Is it Kone or Baleba? Is it Stiller? Rather than Wharton, is it Stiller? So you're paying a little bit less, but filling those needs regardless, because you do need several types of profiles there. So it is a real trick. What do you think, and how are you approaching it? Are you thinking it as two top recruits, or are you 1 and 2, 2 and 1?
For me, it's probably depending on what Bruno does and whether they get in the Champions League. I think if you're going to sign 2 proper, we know who the targets are. There's Baleba, there's Wharton, and there's Anderson. I think that is the 3 really, whichever way you want to rank them in terms of who United want first. I think they are the ones that United are looking at as the premium options. Whether you end up getting 2 of them remains to be seen. But I think, can you sign 2 of them if Bruno stays and Kobbie stays? I personally don't think you can. You definitely need multiple midfielders, and we've talked about maybe making 3 signings or 2 signings or whatever. But if you're going to spend upwards of 60 million on 2 of those 3 players, and who's to say they might not even get any of them? They might choose to go in to other places, I don't think really with Mainoo saying you've got to give him that position to just say, right, this is your position. You can play there. We will find a partner for you. And if Bruno's still there, that's your midfield 3 for next season. Maybe alters the profile of the player that you actually buy potentially as well. I know Baleba's not had a great season, and Anderson is the top of the list at the moment, but I've spoken previously about like the Baleba Mainoo midfield as in the profiles in there, probably a better match. I don't know. Mainoo and Anderson, that could work. Mainoo and Wharton could work as well, but I think it's maybe a little bit light in physical terms. So there's a lot of decisions to make. But to me, I suppose it's contingent on what Bruno does if they go and sign 2 60-odd million midfield players. I think if you're looking at it, maybe as it stands now, I think United will get Champions League. So as it stands now, I think Bruno might stay. That's where I am. That would mean 1 expensive midfielder and then maybe 1 or 2 options to come in and be the rotation options. There's lots of talk and speculation on social about Jimmy Garner as well from Everton, who's out of contract. I don't think Everton will let that contract run. But I think he's got a contract extension, like 1-year trigger. It should make him available for, minimal money in a sense. So maybe United could bring him back. I don't know whether they have a buyback clause in that as well. So maybe that's an option to explore. Do you agree? What do you think?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, you do have to sort of, if Kobbie makes the position his own, it makes a thing a real trick. I guess it does depend on what manager they are going for and sort of how they see the team in the future. I also think that having, let's say it's Bruno, Kobbie, and two others, two premium midfielders, having four really good midfielders for three positions, not such a bad thing. So I think,
can you sell that to those other players though?
Yes, I think you can. Yeah. So if you look across other teams, you often see really good players sitting on the bench game to game. With the amount of football that teams play when they're in Europe these days, cup football, everything like that, even the inclusion of the Club World Cup, you need quality and depth. So I think you can sell that. Like, this is the vision of the team we are trying to build. You are part of that. Bruno won't be there forever. I would like him to be there for the rest of his career. Chances are, maybe he'll sign a 1-year extension if they make the Champions League and then has another clause in it like it has this summer for a foreign club. It really just depends how he sees the rest of his career after the World Cup. I just don't think we're going to know straight away. Unless, of course, they don't make the Champions League, then I sort of think the decision is made because of the financial impact. The rest of his career, I don't think he's going to want to play Europa League football forever. He's missed out on a lot of Champions League by staying with United. I think he stays if they make Champions League, and I'm operating under that premise because I think the team is, and I've said this to you before, I think this team is more than good enough to make the Champions League. In fact, I think they should finish in the Champions League places from here, not to mention the strength of the English teams means there might be a 6th spot up for grabs. So they might actually, if they finish 6th, they might get bailed out by a rival, which would be awful, but awfully beneficial financially. So it does go both ways. But like you said, there are third options that you can sign who aren't bona fide first 11 players. You can sign, perhaps it's a young midfielder. So if you're signing 2 early 20s midfielders to go alongside Kobbie Mainoo, perhaps you're bringing another player who can develop and play less games. So is it like a Nathan DeCat from Anderlecht? Like just that sort of younger player who is ready to be part of a first-team squad but not ready to start for a club of this level. So it's that sort of mid-tier move, smart scouting, but also at the same time, they're doing that at a much lower level. So maybe they won't be doing that. Maybe they'll have faith in Sekou Kone to come back in and play a first-team role. So there's all sorts of things that can happen. So maybe I'm talking myself into just 2 signings. I don't know.
It's really, there's lots of things to be decided, isn't there? Just on, you mentioned there about potentially 6 teams in the Champions League next season. Aston Villa are being a little bit selfish here. They just beat Fenerbahce away in the Europa League yesterday. I think they could really do with dropping out of the top 3 and top 5, and if they want their place in in the Champions League next season, go and win the Europa League, let United in. But look, that would, and the Champions League, the table at the moment, all this talk about strength of the Premier League and that kind of thing, and yet you got all these teams who are in the top 8 or in that area in the Champions League and beating Borussia Dortmund, like Tottenham are crap and just beat Borussia Dortmund the other day. So look, in terms of the midfield and the makeup of it, I think over the course of this conversation, I've decided that Bruno's going to stay for now. United will get Champions League. You get your one expensive option, your rotation option, and maybe a top prospect as well, and maybe bring somebody through. So can you do that in one summer? I don't know whether United will. Do you think Ugarte is definitely going?
Yeah, I think his papers are stamped. I'd be shocked if he stays. He can't be happy with the lack of football he's getting. And I think it's pretty clear he doesn't have the all-round game at this age or at this stage of his career. And I'm not one to really tell him. I just don't think he's quite good enough for United. And if they can recoup a decent fee, or the fact that they've got an ex-United player in Jordi Cruyff, who's now the sporting director at Ajax, maybe there is a relationship there to do a friendly deal, a loan to buy sort of scenario where he has another year of his contract off the books in what would be 18 months time from now, but maybe that's a summer deal they can look at, or maybe Turkey will come calling with enough money to do a deal sooner rather than later. It's a really interesting decision because we keep hearing about a secret midfielder. So say, for example, that secret midfielder was Ruben Neves and he'd lowered his demands because by all accounts, his demands will be too high for what United are trying to do. But maybe that's the sort of player, because he's going to be 28 years old. So he has a role to play in the short term, but not the short to long term. So he can offer real depth in that time, and then you can sell him on again and sort of recoup most of your money in a few years. So there are a variety of moves to be made, and thinking out loud now, depending on how they see the futures of Ahmad, Shea Lacey, Matthias Cunha, and Matthias Cunha is the natural heir to Bruno Fernandes. Would they bring in a more natural sort of 10 player as the third signing who can start to rotate with Bruno, because Bruno just isn't going to be able to play every game next season? Let's hope.
So much up in the air, isn't it? So much.
It's exciting. I think it's exciting.
Good.
I think
it's good.
The possibility of change is something to be embraced. And I think the expectation, like the reminder of the weekend, should be that their expectation of making Champions League is a good thing. We should have expectations of the team, but also remind ourselves they are going to still have bad days.
Yeah, United play Arsenal at the weekend, and I think that's more of it's not a gimme or like a freebie in a sense. You'd like to see United go there and properly like stake a claim. And look, Liverpool haven't been great, and they went there a few weeks ago and got a 1-1 draw, and maybe we're a little bit unlucky as well. I think it's possible for United to go there and get a point, potentially. Teams don't really beat Arsenal there, but for some reason, this Manchester derby win last week has made me think, oh, you never know. Can they do it again?
In a black kit at the Emirates, anything can happen. And I keep reading from Arsenal fans that they haven't won at the Emirates since Jesse Lingard's little celebration. I think Paul Pogba got sent off in that game too. I think we finished that game with 10 men. But they seem to forget we've beaten Arsenal twice at the Emirates in the FA Cup in the last few years. So but apparently those games don't count. But I think they do. So I just think anything can happen. I think Arsenal for a little while, for the most part, I know they won with a rotated side midweek, but the thing they're doing that good sides do is win when they're not playing well. And they've managed to do that through most of the holiday period. And that's the reason they're starting to bridge a gap that people are starting to worry about on Man City at the prospect of Arsenal winning a title for the first time in the social media era.
We'll see how that goes. I'll look ahead to that after Michael Carrick's press conference. But this has been about the midfield. To wrap it, so you think they'll make? Do you think they'll make 3 signings, or would you want them to make? You think they'll make 2? Okay. I
think you sign 2 premium players, just for the fact that they're lacking it. Depending on what happens with the academy players, you either bring in a prospect or you don't. I would like to see, if they do have additional financial flexibility with the Champions League, I want to see them flex a bit of that market now that Christopher Vale is supposed to have. And let's stop bringing in premium players and let's build a star, not buy one.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to go, isn't it? Look, we'll see how it develops. Let us know in the comment section what you think United will end up doing in the midfield. A lot of it's contingent, I think, on Champions League, but at least we kind of know the direction that they're going. I would expect Mainoo to sign a new deal. We know Casemiro's going. Manuel Ugarte doesn't really have much of a hope unless there's a miraculous turnaround over the next 4 months or whatever. And yeah, let us know in the comments what you think United's midfield will look like ahead of next season. Which player do you want United to sign the most? Is there, and you think Elliot Anderson is the one, Adam, just before we wrap? Yeah,
he's the perfect 6. They can't miss the Declan Rice moment again. They just can't.
Well, we'll see. Manchester City. Oh, don't pick Man City. You know, Semenyo went there the other day, got smashed at Old Trafford. Come on, Elliot Anderson. Right. Anyway, we'll wrap it there. Thanks, Adam, for your time on this episode. We're going to record now the new coaches and our ranking list of who should be in charge. So keep an ear out and an eye out for that one as well. That should be coming out, if you listen to this, on Friday or Saturday, early next week, I would think. But thanks, Adam. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching, everyone. Subscribe to the podcast if you've not done so already. All the links are in the description. Follow us on social as well. And see you soon. Thank you very much.